Go ahead and take a seat if you haven't done so already. Morning, C3. Thanks for joining us here in person or joining us online. With the snow and cold temperatures this week, and even another prediction of snow today, spoiler alert if you showed up in person, it really feels like winter has finally arrived. I mean, December was just so mild, and we didn't really see much accumulation, but now I feel we are firmly in the grasps of winter. But hey, fun fact about winter, I don't know if you realize this, that the Earth is actually closer to the sun. You'd think it'd be warmer, right? It's closer to the sun during winter for us. I was driving my kids into school one morning, listening to NPR, and there's this show they have on there. It's Stardate. It sounds like a log from like Star Trek or something, the old one. And they tell you all these fun facts about the universe all around us. And for us, even though we're closer to the sun during the winter, actually because we're tilted away from it, we're actually colder during that season. And they were telling other amazing things about our universe, which is, I just find that stuff really interesting. Like one thing that I heard is that our planet in its orbit right now, as we sit here or wherever you're sitting, we're hurling through the universe at 67,000 miles per hour. And you can add to that the spin, the rotation of our Earth, which adds another 1,000 miles per hour. So right now, comfortably in your seats here, you are being hurled through space at 68,000 miles per hour. Now, in my youthful days, I drove a little bit fast, but I don't think I ever quite approximated 68,000 miles per hour. Sometimes when you're in a vehicle, typically, and the smaller it is, the more you feel that speed. Like one of my, Pete Wildley, he was on keys. He likes to torture me by taking me out on four-wheelers, Pete. And it's amazing that even though typically on the highway you go maybe double the speeds that you would on a four-wheeler, when you're clutching the four-wheeler or being dragged behind it helplessly as one of Pete's victims, you feel that way more than when you're comfortably, cruising along in the highway. There's almost some kind of inverted reality that, the bigger the object that you're riding on, the less you perceive the speed, and yet the smaller it becomes, the more we tend to notice those things. And I just think that's really interesting, because what it means for all of us is that we could all, and we all are, being subject to enormous cosmic realities right now in this moment, and yet our perception of them is next to nothing. And today we're concluding our series, Renewal, where we're talking about God's quiet and cosmic plan for the entire universe. How God is a God of renewal, and the story that he is writing throughout the Bible is that very story, beginning with a garden at the outset and finishing with this magnificent city. God is at work renewing our world. And throughout this series, just to keep our minds fresh about what we're talking about, we've looked at this definition of what it means for renewal. And we said renewal is about becoming new or new again, or to begin something again, or to be restored to a former state. And throughout this message, different parts of that definition have become more and more clear as we looked at certain renewal habits that we said we have to internalize if we want to participate in the process of God renewing the face of the earth. Here we are stuck in the middle between the good beginning and the very good end. And in the middle here, we need to practice these renewal habits to participate in God's quiet cosmic plan for the whole universe. And so throughout our series, we've looked at these different renewal habits. I'm just going to highlight some of them here. The first one we saw was that we need to learn as a people to give grace. That throughout the Bible, the story of renewal can take two very different paths. A path of law and commandments where we try to use guilt, shame, and condemnation in order to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and become better people, or we can go down the path of grace that God has laid out in the scriptures where we're depending on Him, not on our own strength, in order to accomplish the changes that He desires within us. Next, we learned that as we're on this process of renewal, we need to learn how to celebrate small. That very often, God's process of renewal in our own lives is very incremental. Therefore, often it is imperceivable, and so we have to intentionally pause, look back at what God has done and celebrate the progress He's made in our lives so that we can be energized for the long journey that lies ahead. We need to learn to celebrate small. And then last week, we saw how we need to learn how to rebound quickly, that in this process of renewal, we will fail. We should expect that here in the mix between the fall and the finish, we're going to have a journey that requires us to begin again, over and over and over again. In fact, the story within the Bible and all the characters in the Bible all fail in some way, and they need to learn to get back to the renewal process that God has for them. And we need to learn that as well and rebound quickly. And so that brings us to today's kind of finishing idea. This is the conclusion to the message that all of these things add up to one massive reality, and that is God calling us to dream big. That God is up to something incredible. He is at work on a cosmic scale. And even though sometimes His powerful work may seem imperceivable to us, no less it is directing the course of this universe in ways and through powers that we could never understand, any more than we could feel ourselves moving 68,000 miles per hour right in this very moment. And so I want us to think about how we can dream big today, because it's really easy to dream small. Dreaming small is no problem. And even looking at some of these renewal habits like celebrating small and rebounding quick, these don't seem like things that would add up to very much. But what we're going to see today and really throughout the Bible is that God uses these ordinary people, just like you and me, doing unusual habits of renewal in order to accomplish extraordinary results. And therefore, we should dream big, because all the characters in the Bible were ordinary folks using unusual methods, and God, through them, accomplished extraordinary results. And one character we're going to take a look at today is an individual by the name of Gideon. Now, Gideon isn't one of the best known of Bible characters. Some of you may know some of the story of Gideon's life, but I think he is an individual who helps us see clear as day that God can use ordinary people with unusual methods in order to accomplish extraordinary results. So Gideon's story comes to us in the book of Judges. So this is all the way back in the starting area of the beginning part of the Bible, known as the Old Testament, which comprises the story of the nation of Israel. And he's in the book of Judges because this is even before the nation of Israel even had a king. So they were God at that time was raising up certain judges, like these little saviors who would come and help the people of Israel find renewal, and in particular, find justice. Because in the book of Judges, the nation of Israel is being overrun by another nation known as the Midianites, who come and basically raid and maraud and steal things from this agrarian culture. And so the people of Israel need justice. They need renewal. And God uses this character, Gideon, in order to do that. But let's take a look in Judges and see what kind of character is this individual named Gideon. So this is coming from Judges chapter 6, verses 11 to 12, where it reads, "The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abizarite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, 'The Lord is with you, mighty warrior.'" Now, other than the incredibly difficult Old Testament names that I have to pronounce here, there's something actually more unusual going on in the story. Because here we see Gideon, he is thrashing the wheat in a wine press. Now I know none of you are Old Testament scholars, but wine presses are made to press, anybody? You guys are way ahead of your curve here. Yeah, wine presses are made to press wine. It's in the name. And in that day, a typical wine press, they would have found a large stone and carved down into it and made basically a pit where they could throw grapes into, and then they would have people jump in and stomp on the grapes and tread out the grapes, and then the liquid would come out. So here in the story, we see Gideon thrashing wheat, which is really more of an open air activity because you throw it up and the wind carries the light part and the kernels fall down, but he's now doing inside a wine press because he is hiding from the Midianites. He is hiding from them. And so don't miss the sarcasm here in this verse. Don't miss the sarcasm that here he is hiding in a hole. He's in his hidey hole. And the angel comes to him and says, "Look at you, stud. Like, you're this mighty warrior." And I think, in addition to the Bible, expressing a little bit of sarcasm here, which I enjoy, because I've got a little bit in me. Other than that, I think what we see here is the angel demonstrating our first renewal habit of giving grace. So the angel here sees in Gideon, beyond Gideon's deserving, beyond maybe his current talent and skills, he sees something in Gideon that God is going to do, right? He says, God is with you. So he sees this potential in Gideon, although Gideon is just a very ordinary individual. And he himself, even Gideon, realizes that this statement from the angel is total grace. Just in the few verses later on, Gideon admits that his clan is the weakest. This is verse 15. And that even within that very weak clan, he is basically the runt of the family. If we could put that on there, that would help everybody see it. And so he knows that this is grace. He recognizes that he is not, of all the people that God could potentially pick for this, he is the least likely candidate for this endeavor to free the people. And so God is using ordinary people to accomplish this act of renewal. And so since he's from like the least numerous group and he's the run of the litter and all that stuff, you might expect, in order to bolster Gideon's confidence, God would assemble a large army in order for him to accomplish this feat of justice and renewal. But what we're going to see here in the next verse is that God actually does something completely opposite. Judges chapter 7, verses 1 through 3. If I can pronounce all these, here we go. In the early morning, Jerub Baal, that is Gideon. You get a lot of fun nicknames in the Old Testament. And all of his men camped at the spring of Harod. The camp of Midian was north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel will boast against me." And then God actually quotes them in their boast. So notice the quotations. What would they boast about? My own strength has saved me. So that's what we're going to think if they have too many guys on their side. Now announce to the army, anyone who trembles with fear, go home and leave Mount Gilead. So 22,000 men left while 10,000 remained. Now, we don't find this out until later on in the story, but the opposing army, the Midianites, actually has 135,000 well-trained, marauding, troops, And so Gideon, at this point, now that God has taken away 22,000 of his men, he's basically at a 10-to-1 ratio for this fight. Now you might think, okay, that's pretty incredible, right? We can hold there, God. Can we hold there? No. He does it again. God comes back and puts these troops through another test, and so they only end up with 300 troops total, which, and I did the math, brings the odds to 450 to 1. 450 to 1, which, I don't know, maybe this is a little dated, but any Lord of the Ring fans out here? Okay, so Legolas and Gimli, the small dwarf guy, at one of the battle scenes, they're sitting around how many do you think you could take? Oh, I could, and they sit around and I can take 20. None of them, even with all of the superpowers that they seem to have in Lord of the Rings, none of them say 450. Just put me down for 450. I'm good. So these odds are absolutely astronomical. And so you might think, I'm just going to keep doing this in the stories. You might think at this point, well, if God's only going to give him 300 troops, he's probably going to give Gideon an awesome weapon, like a bazooka or a flamethrower, something, aliens are going to come and zap them. No, instead, God arms Gideon with trumpets and his mama's pottery. So he is going to get a trumpet and a piece of pottery. And I just want to pause here and note the methods that God is using in this story. That we already know Gideon is an ordinary person, maybe even a little under ordinary by that was his own admission. And the methods that God uses are very unusual. And again, going back to what we're saying, God's process of renewal in our lives uses ordinary people and very unusual methods. I will admit that celebrating small and rebounding quickly don't seem like they would add up to much. They would not lead us to potentially dream big. But small, consistent changes do add up. I know a lot of us have probably heard this kind of math fun fact before. I think I've even used it in the message before. But if you were offered either to receive $1 million as a one-time lump fee or a penny, that doubled every day, which would you take? And anybody who offers you that, you go with the less obvious answer, right? That's always the way to go. But what surprised me that if you did choose that doubling penny, it would only take, let me check my notes, only 30 days to have $10 million. And then obviously it would double and double and double. And so slow, small, consistent changes do add up. If we celebrate small and then when we fall off the track, we rebound quickly, these things will add up to these big dreams that God has for our lives. But we have to recognize that they are a tad unusual, and maybe they don't seem like they would do much. So, back to our original story here, right? So here's Gideon. He's got like a high school marching band and some vases, some really expensive vases, and he is marching into this battle. And they split into 3 teams and surround the Midianite troops. And then let's see what happens with these unusual methods. Judges 7:20-21. It says, the 3 companies blew their trumpets and smashed their jars. Mom's going to be mad. Grasping their torches in their left hands and holding in their right hands the trumpets that they were about to blow, they shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon," while each man held his position around the camp. All the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled. So they surround them, blow the trumpets, scream a little, smash some pots, but they don't even move in on the Midianites. They just run away. They just run away. And God uses this ordinary person with unusual methodology in order to accomplish extraordinary results. 135,000 Midianites, trained, marauding Midianite soldiers fled that day. And so we dream big because God is up to something big. It has nothing to do with what we think we can accomplish in our own strength. It is entirely based on what we believe God is doing in the universe, that he has a cosmic plan that while at times may be at work in imperceivable ways around us, if we submit ourselves to his ways by giving grace, celebrating small, rebounding quickly, tapping into what he is doing in the universe, then there can be no limit to what he can accomplish in and through us. And it doesn't matter how strong we may feel or how incredibly powerful or our ability to bring renewal to a situation that we're frustrated and feel hopeless about. This is God's work in the midst of us. And when we submit ourselves to what he is doing, we become the kind of people who can live dreaming big. And that is the consistent story that God is telling throughout the Bible. And you can pick any character that you would like, and I will show you how it's an ordinary person with unusual means accomplishing extraordinary results. I mean, Noah saves his family by building a boat in a desert. Moses, a staff-carrying shepherd, God sends to the largest superpower on the face of the earth in order to straddle up to Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go." We've got the story of Abraham, who's been collecting Social Security for at least 30 years. And God comes to him and says, "I think you're going to populate a nation, you and Sarah." And she's been collecting it even longer than he has. Or we got the story of David, of Israel's most famous king before he was a king, facing a giant with 5 stones and a sling. All of these stories pointing towards the main Savior through whom God would bring renewal onto the face of the earth, Jesus, born in a stable, laid in a manger, coming to lay down his life in order to transform the face of the world and bring renewal to us. And Jesus recognized the unusual nature in which God was working. In fact, some of you asked about this when we did our Celebrate Small message, because Jesus uses that term mustard seed to talk about his kingdom. the kingdom, the process of renewal that we live in here in the middle. And he says that this mustard seed will grow up and become big. Mark 4:30, Jesus says, "How shall I describe the kingdom of God? What parable shall I use to describe it? It's like a mustard seed, which even though it's the smallest seeds of the earth, when planted, grows and becomes the largest of garden plants. So big are the branches that the birds can come and find shade." And that's the story of Jesus, this small life who has come into time and history through the most unusual methods has yielded the greatest potential results. But his kingdom is this unusual kingdom, and we have to learn how to live and abide in it in this upside down way. And in fact, just to segue, so this is our last message in our renewal series. Next week, Pastor Adam is going to be back up on stage, and he's going to be starting a brand new series, which we're calling Inverted, reversing common expectations. And in this sermon series, we're going to be looking at how Jesus talks about his kingdom through one of his most famous sermons, the Sermon on the Mount, and how he describes this kingdom as such an upheaval and reversal of how we would expect things to happen, but it's the very way that God desires to work in our life. It's the very way that Jesus worked his redemption, because he came into this world as this small miniature seed, misunderstood by the world, condemned, mocked, falsely accused, and crucified. And then through his death and resurrection, he begins God's process of renewing the face of the earth. But how does he do it? He takes 12 ordinary folks and sends them out with the good news of God's renewal and how God is going to transform all things through this good news message of what Jesus has done through his life. Though it seemed so small, it has become the biggest religion on the face of the earth, because God is working his cosmic renewal powers through it. And so we need to dream big, because it is too easy to dream small. So we need to learn to die to our small goals, the goals that we may have for our lives that don't really require God to do very much in us. It doesn't really cause us to depend on him for very much, because they're small and manageable things that we're trying to attempt. We need to die to these small goals in order to let God do something incredible through us. In fact, another story that Jesus tells right before he's going to be arrested and his life ended, he says, unless a seed falls to the ground and is willing to die, it can't grow anything. The small seed has to break down in order for something to grow and multiply from it. For many, many seeds to come from this thing, the one has to die. And I think I have to say this, that if we want to participate in God's renewal process and we want to dream big, that there's no pain-free way for us to accomplish this. Sooner or later, we're going to have to die to our small things, the things that may seem very important to us, the little things that we're preoccupying our time for. They may feel really significant, like when we're driving along and Pete's dragging you behind his four-wheeler. You ever think, like, I'm going really fast right now. I've got my small miniature goals that are really important and they're really significant to me. And God at that same time is hurling us through time and space at 70,000 miles per hour. And we need to die to the small things that feel so significant so we can live for the significant things that are so easily perceived as small. And that's the only way that we'll dream big. That's how we'll participate in God's renewal process. And that's the only way. to die to ourselves and to begin to follow Christ and his kingdom and his inverted way of doing all things. And so, as we consider how we can do that and take a step forward into that, let me challenge you with today's next step, which is simply this. Try to consider how you can God-size your goals. I don't know what goal you might be thinking out throughout this renewal series, whether it was, something that a resolution that you made at the beginning of the year, or maybe you haven't even considered anything yet, but take what you think God may desire to do in your life and grow it to the point where it can only be accomplished if he is working behind what you're doing. Thinking back to the story of Gideon and his 300 individuals, 450 to 1 were the odds. That's a God-sized goal. I don't care how awesome you think you are. You need God to accomplish something like that. So take what you're dreaming about and grow it to the point where only God can accomplish it for you. And along the way to those big goals, we're not going to change how we're being renewed. We're still going to give grace. We're still going to celebrate small. We're still going to rebound quickly. All those same realities will still play in, but we will focus our eyes higher and grander, and we will go further than we thought we ever could, because the work is God's and not ours. Renewal is all about what God is doing. We can't make anything new in this world. If we want to renew anything, we need to go back to the one who made it all to begin with. And so renewal is God's work in the world. But he invites us to participate in it. He invites us into his kingdom and asks that we work alongside of his spirit in renewing the face of the earth. And we can participate abiding by the kingdom habits that cause renewal. So if we're going to participate, we need to learn to be a people who give grace to ourselves and others. We need to be a people who celebrate small, who know how to perceive and celebrate what God is doing in our lives, even though we're not all the way there yet. We need to expect failure in our lives and rebound quickly, get back up and pursue what God has for us. And when we do all those things, God will grant us a vision of what we can dream big for. Because if God is the one who's doing the work, then the sky is the limit, or maybe beyond the sky is the limit. Because God is doing something amazing in this universe, something that we may not be able to perceive, and yet it is determining the course of our world. And so let's be a people who dream big, because our God is big. Let's be a people who dream big, because if he is the one doing the work of renewal, then there's nothing that he can't accomplish. Let's be a people who dream big. And through us humbly submitting ourselves to him and dying to what's small, we'll watch him renew the face of our world. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your invitation to take our ordinary lives and do something incredible through them. That just as the angel looked at Gideon and saw what your grace could accomplish, so you look at the lives here in this worship center gathered online, and you see an incredible future that can be accomplished through the renewal process of your son, Jesus. And so help us to learn to walk in this unusual, this inverted way of life, and to depend upon you, to seek things that may stretch us, may cause us to lean on you in a way that we've never learned to do before. And through that deepening trust, help us to find the joy and the life that Jesus offers to every single one of us. We pray this in his name.